Right. Welcome everybody to 52 Living Ideas. I'm just delighted to have Shelley Underwood here, starting a new series on fear and destiny. So, Shelley, take it away.
Well, great. Well, thanks, Shrikant. I really appreciate this opportunity. I'm very humbled to be asked here to talk today and really to plan this series, right? And we've talked about it and I'm excited what's coming. So I wanted to share a little bit, since this is the first one, about what the goals really are, right? So we're talking about fear versus destiny and how we manage life in spite of these challenges. And what I want to do is I want to bring something to the table that provides practical application, so that people can walk away actually having something to build upon in their life if they decide to do that. So I've got it's going to be somewhere between 8 to 10 meetups that I'll do under this topic of fear versus destiny. And as I guess most everyone here knows, I'll be doing this every other Friday on Self-Improvement Friday at 52 Living Ideas. And I would say, if this is your first time visiting, John is the other speaker who comes and brings great ideas on self-improvement on the Fridays that I won't be talking about fear versus destiny. And they are outstanding. If this is a subject that interests you, I would really encourage you to just set time aside every Friday at 9. It's just an awesome time here together with like-minded people. So I think most of the people here may have an understanding of if you've been coming to 52 Living Ideas, you know I've been attending for a while and you know a little bit about my story. Maybe even you saw the interview that Shrikant did with me, about an hour-long, long-form interview that was really birthed out of a couple of things. One was the fact that while I was attending Meetup, Shrikant had heard, and everyone here had heard, little bits and pieces of my story, and that garnered some interest. And around that same time, I made a post on LinkedIn about how I went from being a single mother of 5 on welfare to 10 years later buying a house, which had been a huge dream for me, and I was now financially stable. And that post blew up and went viral on LinkedIn. There may be some of my LinkedIn people here I want to say hey to. So out of that has birthed this idea with Shrikant had to come in and have me do a series of some kind on with self-improvement. So you can, if you are unfamiliar with that, you can go to my website, shelleyunderwood.com. That's Shelley with an EY, and that has my blog posts there. It has the video link to 52 Living Ideas with my story, and you can hear more about these things. So without further ado, let's talk about the importance of understanding yourself and why that is so valuable. So when I found myself suddenly a single mother with 5 children, with no money, literally no cash dollars in my bank, I didn't own a home, I had no retirement, I had no savings, nothing. I think one of the things that was a real advantage to myself is that I understood who I was. I understood my strengths, I understood my weaknesses, and I've been working on that and on me for 20 plus years. And I really think that laid a foundation for me to overcome these odds that had been stacked against me. I will say it wasn't always that way. I came from a history of real instability. I moved about 21 times by the time I was 17. So I didn't really have community or support in my life. And I also had some very serious abuse in my life, with sexual molestation and with my father. And also he was very verbally abusive. So growing up in that environment, I developed some coping skills, right? Because I had to, as a child, I had to somehow in my life provide some stability, right? I had to do something that would provide some consistency, some stability, so that I felt safe in my head. So I developed these coping skills, and they really, really worked during the formative years, right? So they really saw me through living in this environment that was very detrimental to myself. But as an adult, these things were really not working. As I entered into my late teen years, moved into my 20s, I really was very self-absorbed. I was incredibly selfish. I was a very demanding and critical person. And I was also very hyper emotional. So my emotions really led everything I did. I didn't have a lot of logic or reasoning skills in my life. I was really, it was very difficult to live with. I remember my husband at the time gave a description about me to someone, some of our friends right in front of me. He didn't even hold back. And I wasn't even offended when he said this. I guess even then I knew it was true. But he said, Shelley would rather argue than breathe. And I really think that was an accurate description of who I was at that time. So these coping skills that I developed to provide stability, to provide security, you know, when my husband at the time described me as argumentative, I was really trying to bring stability and security to my life, right? I was trying to control everything, make it a certain way. And I remember one incident that just stands out to me in my memory, and it's really a small thing, but I remember it so vividly. And I remembered whenever I would load the dishwasher, everything had to be in very specific order, in a very specific way. Plates had to be a certain way, the cups had to be a certain way, and I would spend exorbitant amount of time making sure that all the silverware was in certain order. Like they had to, the numbers had to match, they all had to be facing a certain way. It was really kind of insane as I look back on it now, very compulsive. And even though that's a small memory, I can only imagine how I was in every other way, right? It wasn't just the dishwasher, right? It was my whole life. So around this time, I was married, and I got pregnant with my first child. His name is Ty. He's 28 now, so that tells you how long ago that was. And I was very unprepared for having a child. I didn't even really like children. I never was a babysitter. I was not what I would call a nurturing person at all in any way. But when I had Ty and I held that little bundle in my arms, a love that I had never known before birthed within me. And I'm sure many of you who are parents here, you know, you can identify with that as well, right? There's something happens when you realize you are responsible for this little being that you're bringing into the world. And it was this real awakening for me. And it was almost as if literal blinders fell off my eyes. And I'm not really sure what transpired. I'm really grateful for it. But all of a sudden, I realized what a horrible individual I was. I realized how critical I was. I realized how difficult I was to live with. And I remember thinking, I want so much more for this baby. This is not the best for him. This is not what I want. I want so much more for my marriage. I want more for myself. I want a different life. And so this is when I began to really actively start pursuing self-improvement, right? I read every book I could get my hands on. I was already a reader anyway. I love to read, so that wasn't challenging for me. I started reading everything I could read on self-improvement, on family, on parenting, on anything I could get my hands on. I also began to seek out mentors in my church that I could emulate, women who were older than me, who were living a good life, what I determined was a good life. They were good people, moral people. They had happy families, happy marriages. And I began to really emulate them and hang out with them and spend time with them. And I wanted to learn from them. And this was all really good. And there's a lot of foundational stuff that I gathered from that, but it just wasn't enough. It really was not enough. And I had a second awakening. It was probably about 8 years into my marriage. At this time, I guess I had about 3 kids, 3 little boys at this time. And I remember one day I was, my ex-husband and I, a husband at the time, ex now, I remember we were having a discussion, and it was rather heated in some way. I have no idea what it was about, but I remember all of a sudden I just burst out at him and I said, "You don't love me." And it wasn't almost like it was an accusation. It was more like a plea, a hurt. And he looked at me very befuddled, and he was like, Shelley, I do love you. And in that moment, for whatever reason, I realized the problem was me. I realized there was something deeper going on, that reading books and finding mentors was not really going to deal with. And so I walked away from that conversation and I said, I don't care what it takes. I don't care how much money I have to spend, but I'm going to get better. I'm going to figure out what the problem is, and I'm going to get better. And so this began my journey, really of healing from my past. And, this is not an easy journey when you have a lot of healing, a lot of woundedness in your past, in your childhood, or whenever those things have happened to you. It's very painful. It's really, really hard. But I determined it was important enough for me to be the best version of myself that I could be, that I was willing to tackle those things, whatever they were. So that's when Andy Miller entered my life. It took me a couple times to find a good therapist, but Andy Miller, I don't know if he remembers me or not, but I will never forget him. And really, when you find a good therapist, they almost become like family. I mean, I really felt like he was family of sorts, a cousin or an uncle or something along those lines. He really probably knows me the best of anyone on planet Earth. He walked through all these dark places in my mind, and was really my guide to healing. I entered therapy really at the foundation of it, feeling like I was both too much and not enough all at the same time. So I was too loud, I was too enthusiastic, I was too excitable, I was too verbal, and at the same time I wasn't enough. I wasn't ladylike enough, I wasn't pretty enough, I wasn't smart enough, I wasn't enough, and it was all bundled up in this too much and not enough. And so I had absolutely no self-worth or no value. And through Andy, we really began to work. At the time, I called it rewiring. Now I would probably call it remapping my brain and how I thought about myself. I left there really a different person. I remember when we decided to stop, I decided to stop going. I remember I sat down with him and I said, Andy, I don't really think I need to come anymore. I mean, I feel like the poster child for therapy. I'm like 180, I'm a completely different person. And he agreed with me. And the thing that I think I left with, not I think I know, is that I became a more balanced individual, right? So unhealthiness really lies in when we either think we are too much and not enough all at the same time. We're not valuable. We're not worthy. And then the other side of that, and we all know people like this, is they think they don't do anything wrong. They're perfect. They're not open to feedback. I think about when I was writing this down, Shrikant, I was thinking about American Idol. I don't know if anyone has watched American Idol on here. I don't even know if American Idol is still going on. I haven't had cable in a number of years, but about 15 years ago, me and my family would sit down and we'd watch American Idol, and we loved it. It's very talented singers would be on stage, and it was just amazing how they could sing. But during the tryout process, they would also highlight someone who really was embarrassingly could not sing at all. That would be me, actually, if I was trying out. So they couldn't carry tune. And inevitably, some of these people would say, I know I can sing and I'm going to make it one day. Or they'd say something like, my mama told me I could sing. And, and they couldn't. And so these are the two camps that I think most of us have a tendency to fall into. But for me, and this is the key to today, is being able to have a balanced opinion of myself was foundational to believing that I could overcome my circumstances. I wasn't deceived by the fact that I didn't have anything to work on. I had things to work on. I'll have things to work on for the rest of my life. But I also knew my strengths. So when I was faced with these challenges, I could say, okay, here's the weaknesses that I've got to work on to overcome, but here's my strengths, so I'm going to capitalize on them now. So that is what I wanted to share today. Shrikant, I think we're ready for the breakout rooms now, and I think we've got some questions for those.
Sure, wonderful. So, folks, let me tell you about the format that we've come up with. Okay, Shelley has come up with. I think this is very good for applying ideas. So what we're going to do is that immediately after, for each of these meetups, Shelley would put a thought on the table. Then we're going to go directly into the breakout rooms. Shelley comes up, puts a lot of effort into choosing those questions in the breakout rooms. So you can talk amongst yourself in a small group about those questions. And the breakout rooms will run for about 20 minutes, after which we'll come back here and you'll be able to share, ask further questions. You can talk about your takeaways. So you get to talk about what you got from it, what questions still remain. Shelley would answer those. Then we're going to do kind of final takeaways. And then we're going to look forward. Shelley is actually going to give us homework to do. Looking forward to how do you actually apply this idea in your life. So we're just getting started on this. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and post the questions over here. Give me just a second here. Can you go ahead and start reading the questions, Shelley?
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure. So question number 1 is, what does a balanced perception of yourself mean to you? And do you agree that this is important? So I want you to start thinking about, what does balanced versus unbalanced look like, and how would it be detrimental or a benefit to you? And let me also say that one of my goals in this was, for those that are looking to work on themselves, these are opportunities to begin to dip your toe in the water, to engage with others, and really be vulnerable and transparent about yourself if you're willing. This is a very safe space to really be yourself, which is something I really value about the culture that Shrikant has laid a foundation for here in 52 Living Ideas. So question number 2 is, have you taken a Myers-Briggs, an Enneagram, or a Big 5 personality test? Have you taken anything like that? And if so, are you willing to share what you would say your greatest strength and your greatest weaknesses? So again, looking to provide that balance. We all have things to work on, and we all have strengths that we can capitalize on. We're neither all bad nor all good. We're a combination of both. And then, how are you capitalizing on your strengths, and what measures are you taking to improve your weaknesses? And that's it, Shrikant.
All right, wonderful. So I'm starting the breakout rooms now. We will be back in this, together again in about 20 minutes, starting the breakout rooms now. All right, welcome back, everybody. Welcome back. So now what we are going to do is that we are going to do takeaways and questions. So each of you can go ahead and talk about what you got from your breakout room discussion, as well as presentation by Shelley. And if you have any questions for Shelley, you can go ahead and put one question, the biggest question you have for Shelley. Okay, and we'll keep track of all the questions, and then Shelley will talk about each of the questions at the end. In order to share your takeaways, go ahead and type exclamation mark in chat, or raise your hand in Zoom. Okay, so we'll start with Scott. Scott followed by Mushki. Scott, go ahead.
Okay, sorry, I was talking on mute. All right, nice breakout. Met some people that I had not met, and I've been down this road. As for Myers-Briggs, I'm an ESTP, which is the entrepreneur. As for Enneagram, I'm an 8, 3, and then 5. So push, 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 push. I got to apologize. I put a link in chat that was only meant for you, but that's my book.
Okay.
Because I just wanted to share it with you, but
Sure.
it's about my 2-year journey where I went from being, I'm just going to say, an ass to a Buddhist.
Mhm.
So
That sounds fascinating.
but, the interesting thing here is, numerology, I'm a 5. My birth chart, because I had a friend that was doing astrology, and astrology is so much different than what I thought it was. It's all saying the same thing. So I got a good sample set, call it statistics, that allowed me to say, okay, my tendencies are to go here. But what I found is that through that 2-year journey, becoming a massage therapist, along with being an IT guy and helping people, organic change can happen. And when you understand, hey, you're a pusher, you're a very direct person, show some gratitude before you be direct. Volunteer, take what you did. For instance, I was a sports guy. You can see my Guinness Book of World Records here, and that's me winning a race. And I've got a lot of stuff. But the takeaway and thing is, understand yourself. Change is easy, and get out of your own way. I just, once I got out of my way and decided not to make critical decisions for 2 years, my life got easy. So I took too much time, but thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Next up is going to be, let's see, Mushki, Jim, Deborah, and Joe.
Hi, Shelley. Quick question. On your journey, do you experience a fear of success and the tendency to self-sabotage? And how do you conquer that?
Okay. Shelley, you're keeping track of questions, right? Okay, so that is a question from Mushki. All right, next up is going to be Jim, Deborah, and Joe. Jim, go ahead.
Yeah. Thanks, Shelley. This is good. This is a good topic. And I've taken some personality tests and pretty aware of my personal dimensions. And my takeaway is, you have to really want to understand yourself and make some effort to make adjustments where you have weaknesses or whatever. And it can take a combination of therapy, reading, self-examination, and of course a willingness to change. And in my case, a lot of the change isn't so much, I'm not changing my core attributes, but I'm learning how to compensate, and learning how to work on the areas that I'm weak, right? And so I at least produce the image of a more balanced person, even though if internally I'm still unbalanced.
Well, I think it's a lifelong practice, right? I think if you're in the right place, like clearly you're describing, we're all a work in progress, right? So we've always got something that we've got to be working on. And I think it's a self-aware person who recognizes that instead of runs from it and wants to avoid it because they don't want to face that. So congrats.
Wonderful. Next up is Deborah, Joe, Jean, and Kevin. Deborah.
So in our group, we talked a lot about compatibility tests, well, not compatibility tests, about personality tests, and actually like how maybe you can use those to find your compatibility with other people and maybe use that to connect with other people. And I thought that was particularly interesting. So I guess if we're sharing, I guess like I've mentioned this before, but I got the result of ENFP, which I think is probably pretty true to who I am. And I think what's interesting about those tests, at least that one that I've taken, is that if you do find people and you ask them and maybe they know who they are, it's not necessarily to underscore purely who you are, but maybe who you are in relation to other people. Because if you can find out how people complement you and vice versa, then maybe you can play to your strengths and maybe you can have a positive impact on the world because maybe you know yourself a little bit better and you can recognize certain traits and maybe encourage those things in other people. And maybe that helps you like buoy and encourage other people too. So, yeah.
I love that. Deborah,
Thank
you
you.
always have great wisdom to share with us. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. And your story, of course, was so inspiring. Thank you for sharing it. That's very brave of you to tell everyone everything like that.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Shelley,
I stress about it. I have been sharing with Shrikant how it causes some anxiety. So I'm facing my own fear every time I come on here and share with everyone.
Shelley, I think this kind of you responding directly is working really well. So how about the question that you've written down? You can go ahead and respond to that. And as
Okay.
people are sharing takeaways and asking questions, you can go ahead and respond as we go along.
Sounds great. So Mushki, you asked about if I ever had a fear of success. I'd love for you to expound on that a little bit more so I fully understand what you're asking there.
Okay, I'm a bit ill, so I'll make it quick. So fear of success, because once you have success, you have what to lose, basically. So that's why our tendency is to self-sabotage. Some people are scared of getting too successful, and they rather stick to their habit of staying in their comfort zone, even if their comfort zone is like a prison, as you call it.
So you're saying like there's a fear of success because then you'll have the pressure to maintain it.
Absolutely correct.
Okay,
yes.
Got it. And so therefore you self-sabotage because then it prevents you from having to maintain it. I can actually relate to that a little bit because I think I do that with competition with other people. I'm very intimidated by that a lot of times. And so I can relate to it that way with in terms of success. And so for me, my mantra, which is I will not allow fear to dictate my destiny. When I was trying to overcome my poverty, being on welfare, raising the children, get to a place of success, I just had fear to act, right? I was just scared to act. And so then my mantra was about forcing myself to act. Well, now I don't really have to do that. I've been practicing that for a decade now. So now it comes a little bit more naturally. But what I do know is that when I do feel fear now, like coming to these meetups, it's scary to do something new and to be transparent and vulnerable and share things and make sure, am I saying things that are going to be encouraging to other people, right? So when I feel that, I say, well, Shelley, you're scared, so that means you have to do it. Right. So that's how I handle that. I'm not going to allow myself to sit and keep myself from doing something. I'm going to now say that I must do it if I feel fear, and I'm going to take a stab at it. And I won't always be successful, but I'd rather fail trying than look back on my life and say, I wonder if. I don't want to ever look back and say, I wonder if. I want to not wonder, and I want to know. Nope, I couldn't do that. That wasn't for me. It just didn't work. This worked. I did this and I did this, but I couldn't do this and I couldn't do that. And that's okay. And that's part of that balance that I'm talking about, right? Because you have a healthy perspective of yourself. You understand that it's not going to kill you if you are not successful at every single thing. And we weren't designed to be that way. We're coded that way. We're coded with these strengths, and we're coded with these things that we're just not going to do well. And we need to rest in that. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, that was very helpful. Always think of my future self. How would my future self feel if I didn't do something? Right.
Wonderful.
Yeah, and how do you want to look back on your life? What do you want to look back on? That's very motivational for me. When I'm 80, what is it I'm going to look back on?
Wonderful. Next up is going to be Joe, Jean, Kevin, and Barry. Joe.
Yeah, one of the things that had kept coming up in our breakout room was the idea of feedback loops. So if you go on American Idol, and you can't sing, it becomes pretty evident that you're not going to be a professional singer. However, in life, the feedback loop becomes a little bit more ambiguous, where you don't know whether it's valid criticism or invalid criticism. And having been in an unhealthy environment, you sometimes will start to say, is this valid or not? And so how do you make that determination? That was one thing we were talking about, the idea of it being that it was really important that we have a criteria for success in order to determine, like, all right, this is my ideal self. This is how I'm going to measure myself. So then I have a way of actually determining if I'm making progress or not against my strengths and weaknesses. So that was really what was our main takeaway from our room. The other thing that I would just like, and it was such a tremendous act of courage, actually, throughout you've demonstrated throughout your life on a number of levels, Shelley. So thank you for presenting this evening. It's been fantastic. But is there one thing in particular, one principle that maybe, throughout your life, coping mechanism that you've been able to fall back on repeatedly in order to get you through those very challenging moments, from childhood to your marriage, to dealing with 5 children? Is there something there that you really kind of, and I know it doesn't have to be one particular principle. It could be a framework or whatever it may be. So again, thank you for presenting, and thank you for, being willing to share so much and being an inspiration to so many others.
Oh, Joe, thank you. Well, you're a large part of that with your encouragement, and I've really appreciated that. So in terms of feedback loops, I will make a small comment on that, because one of the things I realized is that many times I know what the right best thing to do for me is, but I have insecurity, right? And I'm listening to this person and I'm listening to this person. And several years ago, I decided that I was going to really get in tune with what I was telling myself was the right thing to do. And that doesn't mean not getting feedback. Certainly there are safe places to get feedback, but there's also a time to trust your own intuition and to act in light of that. And I felt like I needed to work on that. I needed to hear my own voice and be confident in what I knew the right thing was to do, instead of waiting for someone to tell me or stroke me or, whatever, and provide some kind of feedback for me. Just that I was going to take action. I was going to trust my gut. I was going to trust that I was a smart girl. I'm not dumb. Like, I'm smart. I can figure this out myself instead of relying on other people. And that was really a powerful, really built my self-confidence in a lot of ways. So that, just to that point there. And then, so Joe, it's a great question. Like, what is foundational? And so when Shrikant asked me to present on self-improvement Fridays, I wanted to present in a way in which it built on foundation, right? So next week, we're going to add another layer that builds on this. And we're going to add another layer and add another layer of these key things in my life that I just discovered as I was going along, living and overcoming. But I really do think that, and it's Jim, I think Jim was saying it, I think it was Jim, about we really have to want to really know ourselves. We really have to want to look in the mirror clearly at who we are. And I think we need to really be vulnerable with ourselves and say, I am going to look at the ugliest parts of me, at the embarrassing parts of me, at the things that I don't want to know, but I'm going to peel back the layers and I'm going to look at them anyway, so that I can deal with them. And when you live in a place where you just want to look in a foggy mirror, like you just got out of the shower and you can't really see yourself clearly, you are not going to be able to advance. And so that's why some of what I've said today, I think, speaks to that, right? It's this idea of, I'm going to figure out what is wrong no matter what. I'm going to really look at myself, even if it hurts and even if it's painful, because on the other side is a less painful life.
Wonderful. Thanks, Joe, and thanks, Shelley. Next up is going to be Jean, Kevin, Barry, Jyoti, Judith, and Roxanne. Jean, go ahead.
Yeah, so we have a great discussion, and my personality is ENTP, and we found actually it's a lot of time our partner just opposite, or our friends even the opposite person. Like I'm intuitive. A lot of my friends are sensing, and I'm thinker. A lot of them are feeler. Those are the people I get along. Actually, my best friend. So, and I was wondering, that's maybe the reason we attract to them, because one thing is compensate. The extrovert usually hung out with introvert, and so not two people try to talk at the same time. So, but at the same time, seems gave us opportunity to learn from the other one. But at the same time, sometimes when our partner, we don't really learn from them because they kind of compensate each other. So we rely on the other people to do, like, I'm entrepreneur, but I hate doing tax, all these things, like, so I just can't deal with it. So my husband take care of it. And I think Jim mentioned the same thing, like he take care of his wife's, tax. I'm just wonder, I was thinking about you are just trying to improve yourself this, and it's quite inspiring, because I think a lot of time we forgot, like we forgot how to be better, because we think, and I read somewhere they said it's easier to work on your strengths than your weakness. So it's kind of like I'm a little conflict. Do I spend time to work on my weakness, or should just focus on my strengths? If I be the best of what I'm good at, everything will take care of. Other people can take care of the other things. So I'm kind of a little bit conflict what to do.
It's interesting that you asked that, because I watched a little short video on someone who is deals with strengths, right? In terms of in a work environment. And they said, their comment was, you can't get better at your weaknesses. And I was just like, I'm sending you an email and letting you know you're wrong. And I say that only because, for me, anxiety and overcoming the fear, like I was consumed with anxiety. Like there aren't words to explain how consumed I was how was I paying rent? Was I going to have money to pay the electric bill? I mean, when you have a passel of children and they're looking to only you, and you do not know if you can pay your bills, the anxiety is off the chain, okay? So for me, that's what it was. Someone else may struggle in another way, but I was not going to be able to act. I was not going to be able to be successful or overcome if I stayed in that anxious place. But I'll be honest, my nature is to be anxious, right? That's where I'm going to default to. So it doesn't, because I've worked so hard on that, it doesn't rear its head like it used to, because I know I'm going to be okay. I have proven to myself time and time again, I'm going to do what needs to be done to make sure that things are okay and I'm going to survive. But it still is that tendency within me, right? It can rear its ugly head all of a sudden, and I have to deal with it, right? So I think you can get better. I do think we are wired in certain ways that you're going to probably revisit these things, but I would 100% say if you feel like there is something that you don't like about yourself, or when you're looking in the mirror clearly, you're like, that's not a pleasant part of me, I would figure out some way to work on it. And the Stoic meetups here are really helpful with some of those things too, I think. But I personally think that you can change it. Do you eradicate it? Probably not, maybe. I haven't found that I've been able to eradicate it, but I've been able to get it under control. And I've done that with other things too. I'm a very passionate person, so I have a hot temper. I'm very enthusiastic and happy and positive, but boy, you don't obey me, you don't get your bedroom cleaned up, I'm gonna throw the smack down on you, but you can't deal with your children like that. So I had to work through this idea of, Shelley, just because they're your kids doesn't mean you can throw the smack down with them. You got to have a rational conversation with them. You've got to treat them with respect and dignity. You can't fly off the handle. So that was another thing. Over time, is it in my nature to do that? Yes. But as I've worked on it, it's gotten better. I hope that helped.
Okay. Jean, you want to say something? Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I agree on children's part. And my kids really trained to be more patient. I'm also very emotional or hot-tempered. And I found it doesn't work at all with my kids. He's got stressed and doesn't react. So I have to learn that. That's really something I have to work on. Yeah.
Right.
Thank you.
Right. And I've had some kids who it's water off their back. They're more like me, but I've had some children, like my youngest son, he's more introverted. He's a little quieter, thoughtful, and it wounded him. And thank God we had enough of a relationship. It doesn't happen very often, but it'll happen. And he'll literally text me and say, that was harsh, Mom, and that hurt. And thank God we have the relationship where he has the freedom to tell me that, so I can go to him and apologize and say, Bud, you're right. I overreacted and I'm really sorry. Please forgive me.
Next up is Kevin of Barry and Jyoti. Kevin.
Thank you, Sung. Thank you, Shirley. Come back. It's our first time. I took the test for Myers-Briggs. First time is ENTP. So later on, I tried another one, ENTJ. They also find this. I actually last time post question. It should be percentage. That a test, they say the percentage. Then my secret, except first extrovert, the rest all balance. It's just less 10% over another one. So that's talk about our weakness and strengths. If let's say you find your J, try look the opposite side, perception side of over judgment, you will find the right balance. But here's about my takeaways. Life's all about learning the balance. Sometimes flaw is a part of a perfection. If we find flaw early, try acknowledge it. It's hard. Yes. Then try to fix it. For me, my weakness actually is culture shock. Being a new country from China to Canada, I learned both find my weakness, also quickly find my strength. My biggest weakness, I would say, I'm not a good temper. I learned to calm myself down. My question for you, Shirley, is can I ask you, your kids, how your kids learn from your inspired story or rich experience? Thank you.
Well, ask that question again. I didn't quite understand what you were asking. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, your son or your daughter, how will they, talk about a mom like yourself? Like we inspired by your story, your experience. How about your kids?
Oh,
what do they say about you?
Well, I'm Mom, so I'm super annoying and uncool, I think, a lot of the times. I will say that my number 4 son, he is of all the kids probably most like me, except smarter and better. But he is very much a people person. He's a thinker. He loves to learn. So we have that in common. And he said to me once that he attributed where he was today because he runs distance for the University of Georgia, which was a huge goal of his. And it was something we spent a number of years, he was working on, and I was supporting that, and I was supporting it. And, but he said that whenever his friends talk about, because they don't know that where we've come from, the kids don't wear that on their sleeve, right? And when he tells them what we've gone through, he gives me credit for that, which was really, when you have children, you don't get a lot of atta-girls and atta-boys as parents, and so that was really, that meant a lot. And in fact, this kid actually wrote a poem about me in 10th grade. That is just, I'm actually going to have it printed up because it was just talked about my love for my children and how hard I've worked to take care of them. So that's been a shining light. And then there's been many others that haven't.
Thank you.
Next up is Barry. Barry, go ahead.
Yes, Shelley, very good. I think you're an ENTJ. I might be wrong, but I wrote a poem that I think describes what you're saying. I call it Life Sea. Direct mind's rudder, give life direction. Float when the sea's rough. Life goes in all directions. Follow the sea's current. Life goes nowhere. Float when the sea's calm. Life comes to a stop. Set sails without a rudder. Life goes with the wind. Direct rudder with a compass. Life comes to fruition.
Wow, you wrote that?
Yeah.
That is outstanding and beautiful and so accurate. I would love to have a copy of that. Will you share it?
Sure. And then I paint the poems. So I do a painting and then I try to write it to music and, you know.
Wow, you're so creative.
So, yeah, well, that's my motto in life is social rejection is my creative redemption, and creativity gives me relief from my grief.
I like that. And it's very true. I envy creative people. I'm not really a creative person in that way. And I have friends who are really creative painters and what they do and how cathartic that is for them. I think it's just such a wonderful outlet for the challenges and trials of life. Thank you for sharing that.
Okay, thank you.
Next up is Jyoti, Judith, and Roxanne. Jyoti.
Yeah, hi. Shelley, you did an excellent job in presenting your viewpoint and your life about your life.
Thank you.
You're very courageous. You are very strong. I have one question.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, the question goes like this. Aren't some people by nature very resilient and very self-reflective and insightful? It's easier for them to change themselves than some other people who are not gifted with that trait. Do you think that helps?
Yeah, I think that's actually a really great question. And I think that's why this meetup on the foundation of really understanding yourself is vital, because you have to figure out if you are not resilient and you want to be resilient, then you need to figure out what is it that I can do to build resiliency within me. Maybe you won't be the most resilient person on the planet, but you can take small little steps all along. I come from a long line of hyper emotional, anxiety driven women. It is coded way into my DNA. I did not wake up one morning and go, I'm going to stop being anxious today. That did not happen. It has taken me a decade to get here. And even now, it rears its ugly head within me, but I've got coping skills in my head that I've learned so that I can talk myself off the ledge more quickly than I could even just 2 years ago, right? Because I've been taking tiny little steps in this area that is a real challenge for me. I'll share another one. I was not raised to think logically. I was left to my own devices, and because I'm hyper emotional, that's just how I'm wired, right? I'm very emotional. I'm like 98% extroverted. I'm 98% enthusiastic on Peterson's Big 5 personality trait. So I made a decision about 7 years ago that I had to figure out. I had to stop being emotionally driven in all my decisions and interactions. It was killing me. I was not making good choices in certain areas. And so tiny baby steps in how to become more logical thinking. It doesn't happen overnight. And I agree with you. We are not wired to be good at everything. But if there's something that you want to get good at, I really believe if you acknowledge what it is and you set about a path towards overcoming it, you can gain small tiny incremental victories. And over time, 1 step leads to 2, 2 leads to 4, 4 leads to 8, and so on. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's a lifelong journey. It's not something you can do overnight. I understand. But there are people who are thrown to the wolves and then they realize what their weaknesses and strengths are, and they manage very well. There's nobody to protect them and they find out how to handle it. Whereas the other ones, they will shy away from the situations. So no, but it makes sense what you are saying.
And I think
Thank you.
too, it's like someone else just said, that you have to want it. You know, I
Yeah.
hear people all the time say, oh, I want to be a runner, whatever. I'm a runner, so I'm just going to pick that. I want to be a runner. I'm like, you can be a runner. No, I can't do it. Well, you could. You might not run a marathon. You might not be, you know, running the mile in sub 4 minutes, but you can certainly run if you wanted to bad enough. And that's the thing. How bad do you want something? How bad do you want your life to look like the vision in your head? And I really have this belief that we do what we really want. So don't say you want something if you're really not willing to put effort to it. Then you don't really want it that bad, right? That's my philosophy. I could be wrong, but that's what I've observed with people.
Wonderful. Thank you. Next up is going to be Judith, Roxanne, and Mark. Judith.
Okay. Talking about fear, I just wanted to add a couple of thoughts about fear since that's the topic, and then I'm going to ask you my question, which will seem really lame.
Not lame, I promise.
So I know what fear is because I was in an abusive marriage for 30 years. And so I had fear all that time. And when I knew the difference was, I got out of it, it was like a switch. It wasn't gradual. It was like I was in it and maybe something underneath me was happening, okay, that caused it. But when I stepped out of it, it was like night and day. There was no going back, you know, but then I had, I wouldn't call it fear. It felt like really free. But it was every day I knew I had to do something, you know, small things, but you know, you just looked at 1 minute at a time, an hour at a time, a day at a time, a week at a time. And then when you get on your feet, then you're not looking in those short time increments anymore. But that's 8 years ago. Okay.
Well, congratulations and good for you.
Yeah, no. But I didn't have like all the stresses that you had. I had to find a job and I had other like incompetencies. Like I would drive, you know, and I'd be like, but what if I got into a car accident? Oh my God, you know, like everything was fearful for me. But that's when I had that mantra. That's when I had that mantra, just like yours. I won't let fear drive me. You know, I won't let fear drive me. So that's what got me.
Judith, and don't compare your story to anyone else's. You're an overcomer too, and you've come through a lot, and you be proud of yourself.
So now here's my lame question for you. After all of that, and so now, and I have a great relationship with my children, and so I'm very thankful for that. But they're on their own. I'm on my own. I'm enjoying life now, you know. So I get to do what I want, go to these Zoom meetings that Shrikant has, and add my 2 cents, and you know. But I just don't have balance in my life, and when I look at, you know, all the things you had to do, or all the things that my coworkers have to do every day with their families. There are so many things that I want to get done and I can't. So that's my weakness. Okay. Mm-hmm. So I want to make sure that I have time to meditate, do my exercises, read, you know, go to work, attend a meeting, learn something new. And I can't do all the things I want to do. So I have to figure out how to find balance. And I'm wondering if you have any insight on that. I know if I really want to do it, I'll be able to do it.
Well, you know, the reality is that there's some of us, I'm in that boat too, where there's so many things that I want to do and I can't do them all. And it's very overwhelming that the day only has so many hours, right? And I get frustrated because I don't, you know, I don't pick up a book and after a couple of days. Like I'm trying to get through Daniel Kahneman's book, Thinking Fast and Slow, and it's utterly fascinating, but I'm so busy, it's hard. So what I find is, for me, and I think there's a lot of books out there that you could maybe ask around or read reviews on that might help you formulate, like the Atomic Habits, Shrikant, and I think it was Mushki was talking about Atomic Habits. There's books that help you formulate habits. I'm a list maker. I start every day with my job. I'm like, I make a list. I have time set aside, prep time from 8 to 9, and I make a list of everything that's vital for me to get done that day, not just with work, but with, you know, home and my son. And I start off with a list. And lists help me. I think structure helps. Sometimes I have a hard time sticking to the structure. I'll have a schedule and you know, I just get exhausted with sticking to a schedule all the time, but those kinds of things help. Judith, I think you really can get a hold of it. It may just be you have to be more realistic about how much time is in your day, and then find something that works for you, where you establish your goals for the day. And even if you don't get to all of them, if you cross 1 or 2 off, then you've done something.
Thank you.
Sure.
So next up, folks, we had a meetup on habit change. So this gentleman, Spencer, a friend of mine, studied 23 different methods of changing habits. He did this experiment with about 5,000 people. And there is one method that worked out, I think, 1.5 times better than any other method. So this meetup is about that. So I've put that in the chat. Next up is going to be Roxanne, Mark, and Darlene. Roxanne. Roxanne, you need to unmute yourself.
Hi there. Shelley, I can relate to everything you've said. And I just have to say, I feel like you're a soul sister. And I think we'd be friends. Everything that I was going to share, you said. When that woman said she can't get things done, I said to myself, I make lists. When you said, face your fears, I read a great book and it said, do something that makes you uncomfortable every day. And I do that. And I write lists and I self-awareness. So everything you've said is just so spot on for me, which is nice when you feel that in your gut. And when you talked about the gut, that was what I was going to say. There comes a point where you are self-aware and you know what feels right and you know what doesn't. And that is such a great place to be. It's not an easy place, but it is a beautiful place because then you know yourself. So I appreciate everything you've said. I've lived it and it's been great. So thank you so much.
Oh, thank you for your encouragement. So awesome. I love it. Thank you for sharing.
Next up is Mark, followed by Darlene. Mark.
Oops, okay. So hi, Sherry. Thanks for sharing your story. I think you mentioned that you were selfish at one time, but I find it very hard to believe that. So well, I'm not going to believe that. Okay. But I did have a couple of thoughts about this topic I wanted to get your perspective on. We use this term strengths and weaknesses, which I have a knee-jerk reaction to, because we're applying judgmental values to ourselves straight away when we talk about them that way. I think of them more as aspects or qualities, and like what can be a positive in one situation or part of your life can become a negative in a different situation. Sometimes aggression is necessary. Sometimes aggression is counterproductive. So I try and steer away from that. But then the question of like trying to move forward, I tend to look at it as more like, so is this strategy or is this working for me or isn't it? And if so, how am I going to adjust it? But then of course the question is well, how do I know what I want? Now we come back to self-awareness that many people have touched upon. Like until you know what your values are, you don't know what direction you want to go in. So you don't know whether your strategy is appropriate or not. So that's what I sort of start with that. Know your values, know where you want to go, then look at yourself to see what you may or may not need to do about your circumstances or your aspects of personality to get you heading in the right direction. I just wanted to see what you thought of that.
Well, first of all, you always have such great insight, Mark, every time I hear you share on 52 Living Ideas. And this is outstanding. I'm actually going to interject some of that, I think, into what I'm writing about here. I think knowing your values is really important, because I think about what drove me and what motivated me all along were the things that were most important to me. And that is the relationships that I have with people that I love, right? And that motivated me in every level, right? It motivated me to not yell at my kids, right? And it motivated me to overcome my fear, because I had to find a career and I had to get them off welfare. You know, I didn't want to be a burden to them or society, you know, all of those things. So very good point. And I think something really worth all of us here on this meeting pondering on. I think it's a takeaway for sure. And thank you for sharing.
Wonderful. Next up is Darlene. Darlene, go ahead.
Me?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, you put an exclamation mark, so I thought you wanted to say something.
No, I was only I misunderstood, so I put the exclamation mark as my statement
Okay.
prior to my statement. But I did want, as I'm listening to everyone, there's a very interesting conversation tonight. I'm very intrigued by it. But what I was thinking along this line is that, you know, at this point in life, I don't have any barriers. So I do as I please for myself. And it's turned out to be very good, because it actually turned into a job.
Wow, good for you.
Yeah, because, you know, they discovered that I can, the people that hired me discovered that I could do things that were beneficial to their organization, because I had the due diligence drive for their project. So, you know, so it's turned out very well. But I think that unless you have the will to want to change, nothing changes. Because I've listened to other people talk in other meetings, not in this one, but in other meetings, they go, woe is me, you know, my life is miserable and stuff like that. And, you know, I look at it as a perspective, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but I look at it as going like, well, if something's not correct in your life, then, you know, you need to look and set a goal of, I've discovered that I've become very goal oriented in the last couple of years. But, you know, you need to look at it and say, okay, how can I change this? And, you know, what can I do better? You know,
yeah, but you have to want it. I agree with you. And that's the thing. If you don't want it, then
because
it's not going to happen. So, yeah, I think you're spot on.
Thank you, Darlene. Next up is David. David, go ahead.
So, Shelley, a great presentation. I really enjoyed it. And I thank you for sharing your story, because I think it can really help a lot of people. What I like to do is circle back to something that you discussed in the very, very beginning, which is the tests and the I guess the personality tests and evaluations. And it's something that I never really took seriously in the past. I've had a Myers-Briggs done a few years ago, and you know, I'm going to have to go back and try to find my notes to see, because I really, you know, I did the test, and I got, the person gave me, and it was a personal test. It wasn't one done online.
Right.
I think I really need to go back and see what they actually said, because I didn't, you know, it was like, okay, that was fine, you know, and within 5 minutes I hadn't even thought about it again.
Right.
But I guess a few years ago, because I've had a dramatic change in my life, and so therefore I've had to look at different career adjustments and refocusing. So I applied for a job, you know, and one of the things that they required was an online test, right? And it was, as I started going through it, I'm looking at this and I'm going, well, this is just a personality assessment. So I paid attention to it and I did it. I got called for the interview.
Nice.
And when I went in for the job interview, the person I met with kind of slipped a little bit and said, normally you shouldn't have, looking at your resume, you wouldn't have been, you wouldn't have been asked to come in for an interview, but it's because of the way you scored on our test. That's why corporate wanted you to come in for an interview. And I'm going, oh, wait a minute. Maybe there's something to these evaluations that people do take seriously. So I just wanted to kind of pick your brain and get your impression on when you take these tests or when you get the results back from the test, how do you evaluate that? How do you understand that? And then how do you internalize that and use that to build a vision or a direction or a path to move, which is consistent with your personality or consistent with yourself? And likewise, if you see something there that strikes you as, oh, I didn't know that I was like that. How do you build a strategy or build a plan to maybe adjust and bring things into alignment on how you would like to be or how you would like yourself to be perceived?
Yeah, that's a lot, and a deep question. We could probably have a whole Zoom meetup just on that. Really good question. Here are a couple things I'll comment on. One of the things that is going to be part of homework, right? So one of my goals really is for those that have something they want to work on or find it valuable, I want to provide some actionable items to take away from this meetup that they can work on over the next 2 weeks. And one of them is, if you haven't done a test, my favorite one is understandmyself.com. And it's on the Big 5 personality trait. And I took that test this last summer, and me and one of my best friends, we each took it and we set up a Zoom meeting. We set up 2 different Zoom meetings and we analyzed ourselves and each other together. And this is someone who is a very safe person, right? So they're a trusted individual that I can be very transparent with. And I found that to be really effective in bouncing that off of someone who loved me and would speak truth and love to me, right? Out of that test were 2 interesting things. Like, one is where now I know that I'm 98% extroverted and 98% enthusiastic and one of the most annoying people that you could probably ever meet. And it was like this real epiphany for me, like, this is why people are annoyed with me when first thing in the morning I come into work and I'm super happy and excited to see everyone, even though it's Monday, and yay, aren't we all glad to be here? And I had already started cluing into that was rubbing people the wrong way. And so I was trying to tone myself down, but that really shed light on why it was annoying. Like it gave me a definitive, it gave me a picture, right, of myself. So that was very helpful. On the other side of that, on openness, I scored really low. And it was a little insulting because when you score low in openness, part of that is being intellectual or being smart. And so I had to evaluate that because I know I'm a smart girl, right? I mean, I'm not Einstein, but I'm not a dummy either. So then I had to say, well, is this really realistic, Shelley? Is this really who you are? Yes, and this is accurate in some ways, but maybe in other ways it's not. And I was able to bounce that off Caleb, and we could evaluate that together. So I don't think tests necessarily are going to tell you, is it always spot on? I think a lot of times it is, but it doesn't have to be. The other thing I would say is that I have a very, very dear friend who is my very best friend I've known for 30 years. And we really call each other out on our shit, right? She knows me really, really well. So if something in my life isn't working, she is going to hold me accountable out of love. And I do the same thing for her. And I think that is also valuable as you're doing these tests, having someone who really knows you to counterbalance all that. Did that help?
Yes, that was very helpful.
Okay.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Sure. Absolutely. Great question.
Excellent. So Shelley, now let's go to homework. What's the homework?
Okay, hold on. Let me pull it up because it's on my phone. Okay, so it sounds like a lot of people have already done online tests, and which is really cool here. And so many people are really wanting to know about themselves. That's so encouraging to me. So I would say if you haven't taken one, take one. Like I said, understandmyself.com is really the favorite one I've ever done. I felt like it laid out, I'm a very direct person, and I like just someone to speak plainly to me and tell me like it is. And I felt like this test does that. I will say it costs like $10 to take, but you can go in if you want to go in together, you can buy them in bulk and then you get a discount. I actually gave this as stocking stuffers to my kids, so I bought a whole bunch of them. Who knows if they'll take them, but they have them now. So once taken, depending on what camp you fall into, in terms of, we talked about people tend to fall into camps, whether they are, they think poorly about themselves like I did, that I wasn't valuable, I wasn't worthy. I felt like I had to apologize for myself all the time. I felt like I was too much and not enough. And then there's people who fall into the camp of they think more highly of themselves. They're not really open to feedback. They're not interested in really seeing who they really are. Maybe that scares them. If you fall into one of those camps, my advice is journal about it. Sit down and take some time to write about it. Or maybe, if you haven't looked at a test or done a test in a while, revisit it and do some journaling. I think there's something that is very helpful when we write things down, when we write our thoughts down. I've done that for years and years, where I would journal and just kind of pour out everything that was in my head. For me, that was really cathartic. And I also would start writing, like I remember for years, I just would write about, please help me to be others focused and not selfish. I've written it over and over and over and over and over again. And I think as you write it, then it becomes an awareness, right? Then you're aware of, oh, right, this is something I want to improve on, so I can make this small change here. And then the other thing is, not everyone is going to be able to do this. I think it's really challenging to find people in life that you can really trust and be vulnerable. But if you can, if you know someone in your life that you could develop a trusted relationship with, where you can provide feedback for one another, I think that's really valuable. And it's something to think about. Not only have I done this with my best friend, Erin, and my good friend, Caleb, but I also have mentors at work who really want the best for me. And they will speak very hard truths in love, but they tell me the truth about myself, and I want to know it. It doesn't always feel good. Like I'm not like always like in the moment, like loving knowing that about me, but I'd rather know it so I can work on it than not, right? So those are the two things, or the three things I would say would be great to do if this is something you feel like you in your life need to work on in some way.
Wonderful. Shelley, could you recap those three things again?
Sure. So if you haven't taken a test, take a test. And my favorite one is understandmyself.com. Journal about your strengths and your weaknesses, write them down. And then think about if you have someone in your life that you could develop an accountability relationship with, that's a trusted person that y'all can speak truth and love to one another.
Wonderful. So folks, now questions about the homework. Anybody has questions about the homework? Let's see. Anybody? Okay, looks like it is clear. Trusted person. Let me just put this. Okay, so those are the three things. All right, Shelley, this was wonderful. This was wonderful. I particularly like what everybody else had to say.
Wasn't it great?
Yeah, because what it does is that, and this is what is special about this group, is that anybody who kind of comes and puts a thought on the table, everybody puts their mind to it, and everybody comes at it from so many different angles and so many different viewpoints, and they present all the viewpoints, and it's incredible. So I think this is a fantastic start to this great series, and I'm very, very delighted that you're doing this. I'm tremendously honored. So thank you very much. And any final comments, any final words?
My only final word is to you, Shrikant. People have been sending me messages and I haven't stopped to read them. Is there going to be a way, if you in the meeting, that I can come back and read people's chats to me so I can know what they said?
Yes, I will send you the chats.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that.
I'll send you.
But that's it. But thank you everybody for participating. I am just overwhelmed at how many people in the world are thinking people and evaluating themselves and wanting to be the best version of themselves. I think this is going to be a great series, and I look forward to learning from all of you as well.
Wonderful. Well, thank you very much, everybody. I'll see you next time. Bye.